She was known by everyone in her small town as a very simple woman. She lived a quiet life, never trying to stand out or attract too much attention. People who met her often thought she was shy, but in truth, she just believed in living humbly. She wore plain clothes, never chased after fashion, and carried herself with calmness. There was nothing loud about her personality, yet there was a warmth in the way she greeted people and a kindness in the way she spoke. She spent most of her days helping at home and running small errands. To the outside world, her life seemed ordinary and even dull. Many thought she had no big ambitions, no hidden talents, and no strong abilities. Whenever she entered a room, she blended into the background. People did not notice her much, and she had grown used to that. But inside her heart, she carried something much deeper, something she rarely showed to anyone. Her neighbors often said she was the kind of woman who always put others first. She helped children with their homework, guided elderly women when they needed support, and even cared for sick animals that she found on the streets. Everyone respected her kindness, but very few imagined that she had a sharp and brilliant mind. They only saw her gentleness, not the strength hidden beneath it. One day, she joined a community program at a nearby college. The program was open to everyone, young or old, educated or not, anyone who wanted to learn. She was excited because it gave her a chance to sit in classrooms again, something she had missed dearly for years. For her, education was like a treasure she always wanted to hold close. Though she had never been given the opportunity to finish her formal studies when she was younger, her love for learning never died. When she first entered the classroom, the students turned their heads to look at her. She was not like them. Most of them were young, lively, and full of energy, while she appeared modest and reserved. She sat quietly in the corner seat, holding her notebook close to her chest, almost as if she was trying not to disturb anyone. Some students gave her polite smiles, while others exchanged amused looks. They whispered to each other, wondering why a woman like her would bother attending such classes. She noticed their whispers, but she did not let it bother her. She knew people often judged by appearances. They thought she was not capable, not smart enough, not modern enough. But she remained calm. She was not there to prove anything to anyone. She was there because she loved learning. The teacher introduced the course, speaking about the importance of mathematics and problem solving. Many students listened with excitement, while some just wanted to pass time. She, however, listened with deep focus. Every word spoken by the teacher, she absorbed like a sponge. She did not raise her hand, she did not try to speak, but inside her, there was an eagerness that could not be seen from the outside. The days went by, and she continued attending regularly. She would sit in her same quiet spot, open her notebook, and write down every important point. The younger students often ignored her presence, as if she was invisible. A few even assumed that she probably did not understand anything being taught. They thought she was only there to pass time, or maybe because she had nothing better to do. But there was one thing they could not see. Every evening, after finishing her daily responsibilities, she would sit alone with her books. She would go over each lesson carefully, solving problems, practicing formulas, and reviewing examples. While the other students went out with friends or scrolled on their phones, she sat under a simple lamp at home, lost in numbers and equations. Her passion for learning was far greater than anyone could imagine. Still, no one knew the side of her. They only saw her as a simple woman who blended into the background. They did not realize that behind her gentle smile and quiet personality was a brain that once dreamed of achieving great things. Life had forced her to step back from those dreams long ago, but she never let them completely fade. She nurtured them in silence, waiting for the right time to let them shine again. One particular group of students in the class always looked at her with amusement. They would make small jokes about her, whispering about her simple clothes or the way she sat silently. To them, she was not someone to take seriously. They thought she was just an old-fashioned woman who knew little about modern studies. In their eyes, she was far from capable. But while they laughed, she kept learning. She remembered the days when she was young, when her teachers praised her intelligence, when she solved problems faster than anyone else. Those memories were still alive in her heart. They gave her strength to keep going, even when people doubted her. The teacher of the class was a kind man, but even he underestimated her. Though he admired her dedication to attend every lesson, he too assumed she was only picking up the basics. He never imagined she could handle advanced topics. Like the students, he saw her as gentle and simple, but not as someone who might surprise everyone. And yet, deep inside her, she knew something no one else knew. She had spent years training her mind quietly, teaching herself with the help of borrowed books and second-hand notebooks. Every time she faced a difficulty in life, she used learning as her escape. Numbers, formulas, and logical thinking gave her comfort when the world seemed unfair. So, while everyone around her saw only simplicity, she carried an untold story. A story of hidden talent, of silent determination, of a love for knowledge that never faded. And she was ready, though she did not yet know it, for the moment when life would call her to reveal the brilliance she had kept hidden for so long. That moment was not far away. The classroom was buzzing with chatter one afternoon as the students waited for the teacher to arrive. It was one of those days when the energy in the room was restless, and even the smallest distraction made everyone laugh. She sat quietly in her corner seat, as always, her notebook open, her pen ready. She had grown used to the way the students glanced at her, the way they sometimes whispered when they thought she could not hear. That day, however, something different happened. A group of confident students at the back, who often liked to show off, noticed her sitting silently once again. They exchanged mischievous smiles, their eyes glinting with the idea of some fun. To them, she seemed like the perfect person to tease. She was quiet, never responded with anger, and always kept to herself. They thought mocking her would bring them some entertainment. When the teacher entered the class and began the lecture, the students tried to pay attention, but their playful thoughts kept circling back to her. The subject that day was calculus, a topic many of them struggled with. The equations on the board looked complicated, and several students sighed loudly as the teacher explained. But those at the back were not listening carefully. Instead, they were whispering to each other about how funny it would be if she were asked to solve one of these problems. During a short pause in the lecture, one of them raised his hand and asked loudly, "Sir, can we have someone from the class try solving this problem on the board?" The teacher, who enjoyed interactive sessions, smiled and nodded. "That's a good idea. Who do you suggest?" he asked. The student smirked and pointed toward her. "Maybe she can give it a try." A ripple of laughter spread across the room. Some students chuckled, others covered their mouths to hide their smiles. The teacher looked surprised but did not say no. He glanced at her and said kindly, "Would you like to try?" His voice was gentle, almost cautious, as if he expected her to decline. She looked up slowly, her calm eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, the class expected her to refuse, to shake her head and stay in her seat. But instead, she gave a small nod. She closed her notebook, placed her pen carefully on the desk, and stood up. The room grew quieter, though a few snickers could still be heard from the back. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward the board. There was nothing hurried about her movements. She was calm, steady, and carried herself with quiet dignity. When she reached the front, the teacher handed her the chalk. For a second, she looked at the problem written on the board. It was not an easy one. Even the best students in the class had struggled with similar questions. The students leaned forward, some eager to see her fail, others simply curious about what would happen next. To them, she was a simple woman, someone who barely spoke, someone who looked out of place in a college classroom. How could she possibly solve a calculus problem that even they found difficult? But she did not look nervous. She held the chalk firmly, took a deep breath, and began writing. At first, she wrote slowly, carefully forming each number and symbol. Then, as her confidence grew, her pace became smoother. Line after line, step after step, she started solving the equation with remarkable clarity. Her handwriting was neat, her steps logical, and her focus unshakable. The room fell into silence. Even those who had been whispering stopped talking, their eyes fixed on the board. It was as if time had slowed down, and every sound except the scratching of the chalk had disappeared. The teacher watched with raised eyebrows, his lips slightly parted in surprise. She explained her steps quietly as she worked, not for praise but because it was her habit to think aloud. Her voice was steady, and her reasoning was flawless. She did not skip steps, she did not hesitate, and she did not look confused at any point. Within minutes, she had reached the final answer. She placed the chalk down gently on the ledge of the board and turned back toward the class. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No one laughed, no one whispered, no one even moved. The students stared at the board, then at her, as if they could not believe what they had just seen. The same problem that had seemed impossible to many of them was solved perfectly, without hesitation, by the woman they had thought of as simple and ordinary. The teacher was the first to speak. His voice carried a tone of amazement. "That is correct," he said slowly, almost as if confirming it for himself. "Perfectly solved." He turned to her with genuine respect in his eyes. "That was impressive." She gave a small smile, a humble nod, and quietly walked back to her seat. She did not look around the class, she did not search for approval, and she did not show pride. To her, solving the problem was natural, something she had done many times in her own quiet hours of study. But to the others, it was nothing less than astonishing. The students who had suggested her to the board now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their plan to mock her had backfired. Instead of making her look foolish, they had revealed her brilliance to everyone. Some of them looked down, ashamed of their laughter. Others continued staring at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and curiosity. From that day, the air in the classroom felt different. The whispers about her were no longer filled with mockery but with wonder. Who was she really? How did she know such difficult mathematics so easily? Why had she hidden her talent all this time? The same students who once ignored her presence now found themselves watching her with new eyes. She, however, did not change. She remained the same quiet woman, sitting in her corner seat, writing in her notebook, listening with patience. But inside, she felt a shift. For the first time in a long while, her knowledge had been seen. Her love for learning, which she had kept hidden for years, had finally come to light. What no one knew yet was the story behind her brilliance. They did not know about the years she had spent away from school, the sacrifices she had made, or the nights she had stayed awake teaching herself from worn-out books. All they saw was the result, a woman who had shocked an entire classroom with her genius. The teacher, too, began to see her differently. He made a mental note to speak with her later, to understand more about her background. He felt that there was something extraordinary about her, something worth knowing. And though the students were too surprised to speak much that day, deep inside, many of them realized an important lesson: appearances could be deceiving, and greatness could be hidden in the most unexpected places. That single afternoon had changed the way they looked at her. But it was only the beginning. The silence in the classroom that afternoon was something no one forgot. Even the students who usually made the most noise sat stunned, their mouths slightly open as if words had been stolen from them. They had expected laughter, they had expected failure, but instead, they witnessed brilliance. She returned to her seat as calmly as she had walked to the board, her face serene, her steps steady. She did not look around for approval or recognition. She simply opened her notebook again, as though nothing unusual had just happened. But the class could not let it go so easily. Whispers began again, though now they carried a very different tone. Instead of laughter, there was awe. "How did she do that?" one student murmured. Another shook his head in disbelief. "I couldn't even solve the first step," he admitted quietly. The ones who had suggested her name to mock her sat in silence, their cheeks burning with embarrassment. They avoided eye contact with each other, wishing they had never opened their mouths. The teacher, still amazed, kept looking at her with respect. He knew the problem had been advanced, not something easily solved even by bright students. The way she had handled it without hesitation, without panic, was something he had not seen in many years of teaching. There was skill in her work, but more than that, there was confidence born from long practice. He realized at that moment that she was no ordinary student. As the lesson ended, many students left the classroom still discussing what had happened. Some carried admiration in their voices, while others sounded almost unsettled. For years, they had believed she was just a simple woman who sat quietly in the corner. They never expected her to be capable of such intelligence. Now, their assumptions about her were shattered. The group that had mocked her the most walked out together, but this time they were unusually quiet. Finally, one of them muttered, "I didn't think she could actually do it." Another replied in a low voice, "She's smarter than all of us." There was no argument. They all knew it was true. She, however, walked home peacefully that evening. She did not carry pride or boast about what she had done. To her, solving the problem had not been about proving herself. It had been a natural response to a challenge, something she had prepared for without anyone knowing. As she walked through the familiar streets of her town, she thought about how life had brought her back to a classroom. She thought about the young faces staring at her in shock, and though she smiled at the memory, she remained humble. She had never wanted to embarrass anyone or to show off. All she ever wanted was to learn and grow. That night, she sat under her lamp once again with her books spread before her. She did not let the day's event distract her from her routine. She carefully reviewed the topics that had been covered in class, writing notes, solving exercises, and reminding herself that learning was a never-ending journey. She knew that the students would probably continue to talk about her the next day, but she did not let that disturb her peace. For her, true satisfaction came from knowledge, not from praise. The following morning, when she entered the classroom, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Instead of dismissive glances or quiet laughter, there were eyes filled with curiosity and respect. Some students greeted her politely for the first time, nodding at her with small smiles. A few even shifted their bags to make space near them, though she still chose her usual seat in the corner. During the lesson, the teacher gave out problems for the students to attempt. She worked silently as always, her pencil moving smoothly across the page. But now, she felt the weight of many eyes on her. Some students tried to peek at her notebook, eager to see how she solved the problems. They were no longer mocking her, they were trying to learn from her. The teacher, too, made an effort to include her more in the discussion. He asked her questions directly, and each time, her answers were clear and precise. The class listened with quiet respect, realizing more and more that the woman they had underestimated had knowledge far deeper than they imagined. But admiration also brought curiosity. Rumors began spreading through the campus. Who was she really? Why was she attending classes at her age? How did she know so much about mathematics? Students who had never spoken to her before started asking around, trying to learn more about her. They discovered bits and pieces: how she had left her education early in life, how she had faced difficulties, how she had kept studying on her own despite everything. Each detail only added to the growing fascination. The very students who once laughed at her now found themselves respecting her. Some even felt guilty for the way they had treated her. A few brave ones approached her after class, asking politely if she could explain certain concepts to them. She agreed without hesitation, her tone gentle and patient. She did not scold them for their past behavior, nor did she remind them of their mockery. Instead, she explained the problem step by step, making sure they understood. Her kindness surprised them even more than her intelligence. As days turned into weeks, her presence in the classroom transformed completely. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer the subject of jokes. She had become a figure of quiet inspiration. Students who had once doubted themselves in mathematics now felt motivated to work harder, hoping they could achieve even half of what she knew. The teacher, too, often praised her dedication in front of the class, encouraging others to follow her example. Yet, through it all, she remained the same. She still dressed simply, still spoke softly, and still preferred sitting in her corner seat. She never let the sudden attention change who she was. If anything, she grew even more determined to continue learning, reminding herself that knowledge was endless. But what stood out most was how she handled respect with the same calmness as she had handled mockery. When people ignored her, she did not complain. When people admired her, she did not boast. Her strength lay in her balance, in her ability to remain humble no matter what the world thought of her. Still, there were moments when she reflected on how life had unfolded. She remembered the young version of herself, full of dreams, sitting in a classroom long ago. Back then, she had been forced to step away from education, her path diverted by responsibilities and struggles. Yet now, after so many years, fate had brought her back to a place where she could prove her abilities. It felt almost like life had given her a second chance, not to chase recognition, but to fulfill her love for knowledge. The incident with the calculus problem became a turning point not just for her, but for the entire class. The students learned something valuable that day: that true ability cannot be measured by age, appearance, or social status. Genius can be hidden in the most ordinary-looking person, waiting for the right moment to shine. And she became the living example of that lesson. From then on, whenever she walked into the classroom, the students straightened in their seats. They paid attention when she spoke, they listened carefully when she explained, and they respected her presence. She had not only solved a calculus problem, she had solved the misunderstanding that people had about her. She had shown them that simplicity does not mean weakness, and humility does not mean lack of ability. Her journey was far from over. What had happened in that classroom was only the beginning of a story that would touch even more lives. The days after that incident brought new energy into the classroom. Students who had once doubted her now greeted her warmly. Some even asked her for help with their assignments. She never refused. With patience and a soft smile, she guided them through problems, showing them step by step how to find the answers. She was not just solving equations for them, she was teaching them how to think. The same hands that had pointed at her with mockery now turned to her for guidance. The teacher, too, began to take greater interest in her. He noticed how she worked with focus, how her notes were always organized, and how she never missed a class. One afternoon, when most of the students had left, he approached her. "I must say," he told her gently, "you have surprised me. You solve problems with such clarity. Tell me, where did you learn all this?" For a moment, she hesitated. She looked down at her notebook, her fingers tracing the edge of the page. Then, in her quiet voice, she began to share her story. When she was younger, she explained, mathematics had always been her passion. She had been one of the brightest students in her school, and her teachers often praised her. Numbers made sense to her in a way words sometimes didn't. Equations felt like puzzles waiting to be unlocked, and solving them gave her joy. She had dreamed of studying further, of one day becoming a teacher or maybe even a professor. But life had other plans. Her family faced many struggles. Responsibilities fell on her shoulders too soon, and she was forced to set her studies aside. While her classmates went on to pursue higher education, she stayed behind to take care of her household. It was a painful decision, but she had no choice. Her dreams remained hidden in her heart, quietly waiting, while she carried out her duties without complaint. Even then, she never allowed her love for learning to die. She borrowed books from neighbors, visited libraries when she could, and studied late at night after finishing her chores. She worked by the dim light of a small lamp, solving equations in worn-out notebooks. No one around her knew how much time she spent teaching herself, but it became her secret world, a place where she could still hold on to her passion. The teacher listened with admiration as she spoke. There was no bitterness in her voice, only calm acceptance. She told her story not to gain sympathy, but simply because he had asked. He realized then that her strength was not only in her intelligence but also in her resilience. She had faced challenges that might have broken others, yet she had continued quietly, without giving up. When the students gradually learned more about her background, they were deeply moved. Many of them had taken their education for granted, complaining about lectures, skipping assignments, or wasting time. But here was a woman who had fought silently for years just to keep her love for knowledge alive. It made them think differently about their own opportunities. Some even confessed to her that they had been careless about their studies and wanted to do better. She encouraged them kindly, telling them that learning was never a race. Step by step, she would say softly, if you keep moving forward, you will reach your goal. Her presence in the classroom soon became a source of motivation. Students began to respect her not only for her intelligence but also for her journey. They realized that behind her simple appearance was a story of courage and dedication. She had walked a difficult path, yet she carried herself with grace and humility. Outside the classroom, word about her began to spread. Other teachers heard of her talent, and some even came to observe the classes where she participated. They were equally astonished by her ability to solve complex problems. A few of them spoke to her directly, praising her determination. She accepted their words with the same calm smile, never showing pride, never letting the attention change her. But the students were the ones most affected. They could no longer ignore the lesson her life had taught them, that one should never judge a person by their clothes, their background, or their quiet nature. True worth lies much deeper. Her story reminded them that greatness can remain hidden until the right moment, and when it shines, it leaves everyone humbled. One afternoon, during a group study session, a student asked her, "Why did you never tell anyone that you were so good in mathematics?" She thought for a moment before replying. "Because I didn't need to. Learning is not about showing others how much you know. It is about satisfying your own heart. If knowledge makes you proud, then it is no longer knowledge, it is only ego. But if it makes you humble, then it is wisdom." Her words left the students thoughtful. They realized that her intelligence was matched by her wisdom, and that was what made her truly remarkable. The students who had mocked her in the beginning found themselves the most changed. They had once seen her as someone to laugh at, but now they were ashamed of their actions. Some of them gathered courage to apologize to her. She listened quietly and then forgave them with a smile. "It is easy to misunderstand what we do not know," she said softly. "What matters is that you choose to understand now." The teacher decided to share her story with the class one day. He spoke about her dedication, about how she had never allowed difficulties to destroy her love for learning. He reminded the students that education is not just about passing exams but about building character. "Look around you," he said, pointing toward her. "You have someone in this classroom who proves that real knowledge is not about age, appearance, or status. It is about persistence, patience, and humility." The students clapped, not because they were told to, but because their hearts agreed. She looked down shyly, her cheeks warm, unused to such recognition. But she also felt a quiet happiness. For years, Her efforts had been known only to herself. Now, others saw the truth, and though she had never sought their approval, she was grateful that her journey could inspire them. Her life began to change in small ways. People greeted her more warmly, treated her with greater respect, and even sought her advice on matters beyond mathematics. She had become more than just a classmate, she had become a symbol of perseverance and hidden talent. Yet, she never let the attention distract her. She still walked into the classroom the same way, still sat in her quiet corner, still opened her notebook with focus. She had not come for fame or admiration. She had come because learning was her joy. And so, while the world around her now looked at her with different eyes, she remained unchanged within. Her heart still carried the same simple love for knowledge that had carried her through all the difficult years. She knew there would always be challenges ahead, but she also knew that as long as she held on to her passion, she would overcome them. Her story had finally been revealed. The truth of her hidden brilliance had come into the light, and with it, a new chapter of her life had begun. But she did not see it as the end of her struggles or the start of fame. She saw it simply as another step in her long journey of learning, a journey she had no intention of ending anytime soon. The classroom was no longer the same as before. Once it had been filled with casual whispers and careless laughter directed at her, but now it carried a quiet respect whenever she entered. Students looked up as she walked in, some greeting her softly, others simply smiling with admiration. She acknowledged them with a polite nod and went to her usual corner seat. To her, nothing had changed. To them, everything had. Weeks passed, and her influence on the class only grew stronger. She did not try to stand out, yet she became the center of attention in her own way. Whenever a difficult question was presented, all eyes turned toward her almost naturally. Some students even stopped waiting for the teacher's explanations and instead asked her to show the solution. She never refused. She walked to the board with her calm steps, explained each detail with patience, and always reminded the others that they too could solve it if they practiced enough. Her humility was what impressed everyone the most. She never acted as if she were above them, never reminded them of the time they had mocked her. She remained approachable, answering questions even when they were simple, never showing frustration, and never making anyone feel less capable. This gentle nature slowly changed the way students behaved, not only with her but also with each other. They began treating one another with more patience, more respect, and less arrogance. The teacher often found himself watching her with pride. He knew that what had begun as a joke to embarrass her had turned into a lesson for the entire class. One day, while addressing the students, he said, "Sometimes life places in front of us people who remind us of values we forget. She has reminded us all that true strength lies not in showing off but in working silently with dedication. Let us learn not only mathematics from her but also humility." The students nodded, understanding his words deeply. For many of them, she had become an example of what it meant to pursue knowledge with sincerity. They started studying harder, motivated not by competition but by a desire to honor the chance they had been given. Outside of the classroom, her story spread further. Students told their friends in other departments about her. Some teachers spoke about her determination in their staff meetings. Slowly, her presence became known in the college. People admired the way she balanced her simple life with her remarkable intelligence. Some even invited her to share her experiences, hoping to inspire others. She was shy at first, unused to speaking in front of large groups, but when she did, her words touched hearts. She spoke not with big, fancy phrases but with honesty. "Do not waste the opportunities you have," she told them. "There are people who would give anything to sit in your place and learn." Her sincerity moved many students to tears. They realized how lightly they had taken their own education, while she had cherished every moment of it. But for her, the biggest change was not the respect she received, nor the attention from others. It was the quiet joy of knowing that she was finally able to live her passion openly. She no longer had to hide her notebooks at night, no longer had to study in secrecy. Now, she could walk into a classroom each day and feel like she belonged. That sense of belonging filled her heart with peace. The same group of students who had once mocked her made the greatest effort to show their change. They often asked her to join their discussions, invited her to sit with them, and treated her with genuine warmth. She accepted their kindness without holding on to the past. Forgiveness came easily to her, because she never carried anger in the first place. She had always known that laughter born from ignorance does not last long. What lasts is the truth, and the truth had now been revealed. One afternoon, after another difficult problem was solved by her at the board, the class clapped loudly. She blushed at the attention, lowering her eyes, but the sound of applause filled the room with happiness. It was not just about her solving mathematics anymore, it was about what she represented. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, of the idea that knowledge can shine no matter how long it has been hidden. At home, her family noticed the difference too. She returned each evening with a light in her eyes that had not been there before. Her relatives listened as she spoke about the day's lessons, about the questions asked in class, about the students who came to her for guidance. They were proud of her, realizing that her years of silent learning had finally found a place where they could be recognized. Her journey also inspired younger children in her neighborhood. They saw her walk every day with her books, and some began to ask her for help with their schoolwork. She gladly sat with them, explaining sums and equations, teaching them not only the answers but also the joy of discovering solutions. She reminded them that education was a gift, one that should never be wasted. As time went on, the respect she earned only deepened. She never demanded it, never sought it, yet it came naturally because of who she was. The simple woman who had once been invisible in the corner seat was now admired by all. But she never let that admiration change her heart. She continued to wake early, finish her daily tasks, and sit down with her books at night. To her, learning was not about applause. It was about the quiet happiness it gave her soul. The teacher often thought about her journey and how it had touched everyone. He knew that when the course ended, students would carry her memory with them. They might forget some of the formulas, some of the lessons, but they would never forget the woman who had taught them what humility and perseverance truly meant. On the last day of the program, the teacher asked her if she wanted to say something to the class. At first, she hesitated, shy as always. But then she stood up, holding her notebook in her hands, and spoke softly. "I want to thank you all," she said. "Not because you respect me now, but because you gave me a place where I could do what I love most, learn. Life sometimes takes us away from our dreams, but if you keep those dreams alive in your heart, they will find their way back to you. Never give up on learning, no matter how hard life becomes. Knowledge will always be your companion." The room was silent as she spoke, every student listening carefully. Some had tears in their eyes, touched by her words. When she finished, the entire class clapped again, louder and longer than ever before. She stood there quietly, her eyes lowered, but her heart full of gratitude. She left the classroom that day not as the woman who had been mocked, but as the woman who had inspired. Her story remained with everyone who had witnessed it. They would carry it in their hearts, a reminder that greatness does not always come dressed in glamour, and genius does not always arrive with pride. Sometimes, it lives quietly in the most unexpected person, waiting for a chance to shine. She walked home as the sun set, the sky painted with soft colors. She carried her books close to her chest, her steps steady, her mind peaceful. She knew that life would continue with its challenges, but she also knew she had already won something far greater than recognition. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that even the simplest person could carry extraordinary brilliance. And in that truth, she found her strength. Her journey was not the story of a classroom alone. It was the story of life itself, how perseverance can break barriers, how humility can win respect, and how knowledge can light even the darkest paths. And though she walked home quietly that evening, in the hearts of many, she had become unforgettable.